This was the most famous chassis ever in the history of Penske Racing. Sometimes we would stagger our truck arms a little bit. The seat, the arm on the right side right here, I think it's got some power, man. It gets it.
So we're standing here with Rusty Wallace, and this is the legendary Midnight. He just got it restored, and he's going to tell us all about it.
This is the car that was a Pontiac. We won Richmond, Virginia with it. In Victory Lane, my buddy Tom Roberts said, hey, let's name it Midnight. I said, let's do it. And Midnight went on to win 13 races, that chassis did, but it had tons of top fives, led a ton of laps, and it got to be a legendary car. All the fans loved the name Midnight, and so every time the car would show up at a racetrack, they go, man, what car are you driving? I said, Midnight. And they go, oh yeah, we're going to win tonight. In fact, I used to have drivers come up to me and say, hey, which car you got here today, Wallace? And I go, Midnight. And he went, oh man, because they knew that thing was going to be tough to handle, you know, because it's a really good car. But I got inducted into the Hall of Fame 2013. My son Greg had the car restored. The original body put back on it when I ended was a Ford. So we raced Pontiacs, and then in '94 we switched to Ford and put Ford bodies on all our cars. Well, Midnight was still the lead car in the stable. We got it all done, and then we went straight to Rockingham, North Carolina in '94 as a Ford and won again, and the car kept winning. So it ran its course. And then when I got inducted in the Hall of Fame in '13, everybody's like, what car should we bring out to put on display? And they said, let's do Midnight, and let's put a fresh body on it, make it just like it was. So we did that, but we never did have the real race engine in it, never did have the real race gear in it, called Doug Yates. Doug Yates hooked us up with one of the original engine builders that was building the C3 engine, and they took off wide open with this project. And right now, as we're doing this interview, we just got it back. It's 100% restored, brand new race-ready race engine, so ready they told me if I wanted to line it up and run the Coke 600, the motor's race-ready. New rear end, new transmission, new everything, and we're really, really proud of it. And so today, when we get done doing this video, we're going to load it up and it goes straight to the Hall of Fame, the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in Daytona Beach, Florida. And it's going to sit down there on display for probably a year or longer.
Anybody watching this video can go see it.
Yeah, that's right.
Even cooler. What happened to this car from when it stopped racing until 2013? Because that's almost 20 years of where's Midnight?
The car was in storage, and it was just, we knew exactly where everything was at. We've always kept an eye on it, always had it under cover. And then when it was time to do something, like I said, for the Hall of Fame, that's when we got it. Went and got it back, and this was the most famous chassis ever in the history of Penske Racing when it was a single car team. So we got it, and that's when we had to have a reason to restore it and get it going, and the reason was me being inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Why did it stop getting used if it was so dominant?
It stopped getting used because it was a dominant car. We led a lot of laps, like I said, but it got to a point where it just wasn't as fast as it used to be. Competition was catching up, you know, it was starting to show its age. It was around for a long time, and finally we start becoming where, you know, it was top fives and top tens instead of dominating and leading laps like it did. So it ran its course. It took a long time for it to run its course because it was a really fast car. But the neat thing about the car, I think anybody that's a fan of mine, you mention the word Midnight, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
They definitely do. Those old shirts on eBay are still going for like 200 bucks.
Well, I like the one you got on too. That's a Midnight. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Looked hard for that.
You know what's crazy? You know, back in the day, I mean, we used to name our cars, and all the fans they just didn't go, hey, that's chassis 009, or this is car number 4. Every car had a name. They don't do that any longer, and why they don't do it, man, I don't know. I think it's a dumb thing that they don't name their cars, because the fans loved it. I mean, look at you, you're wearing a Midnight shirt. I mean, that was a hot deal. That's cool. So
they should bring that back. Somebody
they need to bring it back. But everybody knew Midnight, didn't they?
Who's going to be the first person?
Inspiration behind the name Midnight?
Okay, I won the race at Richmond, and what happened was it rained. And when it rained at Richmond, they went under a red flag for a while. And so then when we restarted, we took back off, we took back in the lead, and when I crossed the start-finish line, after all this rain delay, it was Midnight. I didn't know that. And so I pulled into victory lane, and my buddy Tom Roberts, my PR guy, came up and said, Rusty, I got a name. I said, what? He said, man, I looked down at my digital watch, and when you crossed that start-finish line, my watch went to midnight. He said, let's name it Midnight. And I said, man, that's a great idea. And I love the name, you know. So we won, and we named it Midnight because we won at the stroke of midnight at Richmond, and that's how it got its name.
That is cool. Was there anything technically different about this chassis that made it more preferable to you than other ones?
You know, I think you'll have all kinds of drivers and crew chiefs to tell you, man, they've always had this one car that just everything about it just did everything right. It behaved right. It was always predictable. It always handled good. And that's what the deal was with Midnight. I mean, if I look at the suspension points, I look at the rear suspension points, I mean, we tried to copy this car 4 or 5 times back at Team Penske, and we did. And we got real close with how our cars would run compared to it. But man, even though everything looked identical, it just had a little something that was just a little bit better. All the time, something was just a little better on this car. And it was just that way with a Pontiac, and it was that way with the Ford. So was the chassis. It really wasn't the body, and it really wasn't the engine. It was the way this car was welded together, maybe. Maybe the pivot points were a little different, but I don't think so, because we jigged the car all up, trying to copy it. But it was just a special one, man. It's just, you sat in it, it almost felt different when you sat in it. Your vision out the windshield was different just a little bit. Everything was just tiny, but enough that it was just, every time I got in this car, man, I had so much confidence, and it just handled so good all the time.
Let's check out some of the technical parts of this car, like under the hood and all that.
Come over here, Greg. Let's show them what we did here.
I went to restore this car. I wanted to make sure that everything was really kind of proper and correct there. So I went to, when you think about Ford engines, the only guy I think of right now is Doug Yates. He's the man. So I called Doug and Jeff Clark and asked them, you know, who would be the best guy to build an authentic race engine for this period. And they said there's only one person out there, and it's Nick Ramey. You know, Nick was Robert's right-hand guy during that period. He knows everything about these engines. So I called Nick, and he came out. We talked about the project, how much power it should make, you know, what the engines made back then, and then he really went to work sourcing all the parts for it. When we pulled this engine out, we found that it was a lot of show car parts, a lot of just, really blown up race car stuff that they put kind of more or less to make it, you know, make it a show car. So there wasn't a whole lot that was salvageable, a few parts, but Nick worked really hard trying to find authentic parts. Actually went and found an authentic Penske block from that period, and that's where they actually built the engine up on. So this is an authentic Ford C3 engine from that period. It makes about 750 horsepower.
That one key thing he said right there, I mean, all these teams, like a Ford block's a Ford block, okay?
Yeah.
But the way we would mount the accessories to the block, you know, whether the way the front motor mount would go on it or whatever, was a little bit different from team to team. So they had to hunt around and find a Ford block, that one of our Penske Ford blocks, and they found almost a brand new one and got it and did some machine work and like Greg said, built it there. But I mean, what's so cool about it is that this isn't just an old show car motor. I mean, this baby is race ready. I'm talking, go out and start the biggest race of the year and have confidence it's going to finish 500 miles.
You can tell just by the sound of it that this is not a screw around engine. Like
No.
just when it's kicking you in the chest at idle, you know it's ready to go.
So one of the big things that we've been talking about is making the Southern 500 Throwback Week really, really big. Jim Francis kind of challenged a bunch of us to sit down in a room and talk about how to make it bigger. And one of them was to get real authentic cars and help pace the field for the Southern 500. So this car is going to be one of the cars pacing the field for the Southern 500 next year in Darlington, along with other cars. We'll probably also take it out to Las Vegas and pace the race in Las Vegas, because they just made me the Grand Marshal for the second race out in Las Vegas. So now I got a little competition from Mark here.
Yeah.
It sounds so good.
Yeah, but just I'm glad you said that, because gosh, we started this thing up and just hearing how loud it is and how much it's just pounding horsepower out the pipes. It sounds so cool. Spin it.
I'm gonna let you put it back on though.
No, I'll let you put it on.
You're gonna be filming for a while, and then we'll spin this for a minute. See if that temperature gauge right here actually reads reads there's a probe inside the oil tank here. And that'll tell us where the oil temperature is. It'll drop down like 130 or so, and then we'll have to heat it back up to 180 before we.
Yeah, before what we're doing, it's close enough.
How long do you have to have that plugged in to get it up there from room temperature?
That's been on for probably an hour. It takes a long time.
Huh.
Now, if that was the real deal, I mean, we had the probes that are more efficient and have the car plugged in. And we had that oil about 220 or something before we go out on track for practice and stuff. But for what we're doing right here, it's fine. Good, Greg? Good? Yeah, it's good enough.
Right.
I gotta say, the paint on this, after looking at all the modern cars with all the wrap, you just can't beat paint.
That's what's so cool about this particular black and yellow car. I mean, it's all paint. It's all exactly like Mr. Penske and myself and Don Miller and all the guys and Walt Zarnicki back then. We laid this paint scheme out, and it's so beautiful, man. I love it. I'm with you. I'm not real big on just the decals. When you look at real paint compared to a wrap, it's way different. But you know, nowadays they wrap everything because it's lighter. But back then it wasn't. This is the real McCoy right here. I mean, you're talking about all the aluminum panels in the front, all handmade, everything, and it's just absolutely perfect.
Is that, was that yellow metallic back then too?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, that's that yellow is hard to find. It's almost a mustard color. It's almost a yellow mustard.
Yeah.
And the shape of the number 2, Don Miller designed that. Don made the bottom thicker, then a little thicker, then thinner, and that too was just. I thought he did a perfect job designing that thing. So it turned out really good.
You want to talk about paint and decals? One of the cool things I noticed on this car was now all your vinyls all printed now. Well, back then obviously they didn't have printers, so everything was cut cast vinyl. So you'll see this is actually layered. This red is layered on top of the yellow, and that's actually how they used to do it. Instead of now everything's flat and printed, but this is actually several layers, so it's kind of authentic to what was on the car back then.
And that looks more vibrant too, because you can't get the same color out of a printer as you can with dyed vinyl. Yep. You guys know pretty well by now that I'm really into the details, and I'm always questioning things, even the littlest things, like paint being metallic versus not metallic. A lot of you know we use Pennzoil, and one of my favorite paint schemes is this DEI Steve Park one here. And all the die casts I have of this have this really cool metallic yellow on there. It's just got this different look to it, but the Kevin Harvick Pennzoil car doesn't. And I know the real car does not have metallic in it either, because these things are usually pretty accurate. We saw the car in person, and that color yellow, that metallic yellow over the whole car was just so good looking. I wanted to figure out what it was called. Did some research on the internet, couldn't figure out anything. I called Michael Thomas, who's been working at Pennzoil since the 80s. I figured if anybody knows, he's gonna know. And he had all kinds of interesting stuff to tell me about it. I know you guys are familiar with this car, but do you remember the Nismo GTR from Gran Turismo? Same color yellow. Indy car, same color yellow. Top Fuel car, same color yellow. They were super picky about their yellow across the board. Only thing he knows about it is that it was Pennzoil yellow, and it was a proprietary pigment that they had. Any of the Pennzoil sponsored cars in the late 90s, early 2000s were probably painted in Pennzoil yellow, just like these die casts are, because they care about the details. Not only do we love it, but the people who work there are some of the most passionate about their own history within motorsports that we have found basically anywhere. So next time you're at the parts store looking for stuff to do an oil change, give Pennzoil a shot. Were you disappointed whenever Miller wanted to do the light and change the colors around? See, white and blue instead of
not as much as when I look back at it right now. I mean, this thing was so iconic. The color, it was so cool, and then when they said, "Hey, let's do the Miller Lite car," I'm like, "Okay, man, we'll do the Miller Lite car. That's a cool deal because everybody knows Miller Lite." And so you race it, you do that, and then now I look back at it and I go, "Man, this car was so much cooler than you know." But everybody knew the Blue Deuce, they knew all those colors. I get it, but man, this thing was just so hot. I just loved the colors.
Did you like it better as a Pontiac or a Ford?
Oh, that's a good question. With a Pontiac, I won, I remember in '93 we won 10 races with a Pontiac. I mean, that was the most people were winning in a long time. So 10 races, and then Mr. Penske puts a new deal together with Ford, and so we built a Ford. And that year we won 8 races. So I won 10 one year with Pontiac. In '94 we won 8. So I liked them both. I really did. Both the car companies were really good to us. They treated us really, really good. And we won a lot of races for both of them.
Because you ran Pontiac a lot earlier in your career too, with ASA and all that.
And I will tell you, I miss Pontiac. I miss Pontiac, you know, not being around right now, because I said they all treat us good. Well, Pontiac treated us really good, and I was able to win my championship in a Pontiac, so that was pretty special. It was real sad when I heard that they were going to close up shop and there wasn't going to be a Pontiac car any longer. I couldn't believe it. Still to this day, I can't believe it. I think that's just such a cool brand, but whatever. But I miss it. I do.
You ever deal with John Callie's back then?
John Callie's, Don Miller dealt with John Callie's more than I did. But I did deal with John, yeah, I sure did. He was a pretty damn smart guy, you know, no doubt about that.
We just made a video with him a couple months ago at his home shop. He's got all kinds of stuff on the walls. It was really cool. Made me miss Pontiac too.
Well, fire it up and drive it outside, Gregor. I pump it up a couple times and fire it up.
Wow.
Oh man, I miss that sound, boy. I mean, you think about it, that's 750 horsepower now, and at the very peak, man, we had these things up like 900 horsepower. In fact, our qualifying motors like 950 at the end of 2005. And to think NASCAR is running less horsepower than that nowadays, but that thing sounds like it's making 1,000 horsepower. It's unreal.
So you even got Penske Miller Lite shocks on there, like everything.
Were those the original ones?
Those are the original shocks.
Okay, because I noticed it even had Midnight on the back of the shocks.
Yeah.
I think it's, I don't know if it has it on both, but I know on that one it is for sure.
Yeah, it does. RW Midnight.
Those are the original shocks the last time the car was drove. And I have to get, Greg, you have to do some research and see what our last race was with the car. Do you know what it was by chance?
It was this car ran a little bit into 1997.
Oh, did it?
Really?
Yeah, it actually did. It ran primarily in 93, and 93, 94, 95 some. Then into, I could pull all the history off it, but it actually ran a little bit in 96, and then it was crashed in, I believe, the Coke 600. It actually ran second in the Winston, and they decided to bring it back the next week. It wrecked in the Coke 600, really bad wreck, pretty much killed the car. They ended up rebuilding it. Then in 97, they brought the car back, and they're having some struggles. Their current cars weren't that fast, and they brought it back to kind of evaluate compared to the current cars, from my understanding. And it ran a couple races. Best finish was like 12th, I believe. And then when the car was when Ford switched to Tauruses in '98, this car was actually reskinned as a Taurus, thinking they might run it again, but it never actually ran as a Taurus. So it ended its life, hence, you know, all the Miller Lite logos and whatnot. It actually ended its life as a Ford Taurus, but it never raced like that.
And so then when the Hall of Fame happened, when I got put in 2013, that's when they grabbed it, pulled the Taurus body off of it, and put the original Midnight body back on it, which was this particular body shape. And this was the body that I drove in Rockingham for our very first victory with Ford Motor Company. It was this paint scheme, it was this style Ford, it was this whole thing, basically the way it's sitting right now.
And we had a group of guys from Penske, Chuck Grafar, who's one of the key fabricators back then, Dave Venaris, the body guy, and they helped us with the body work back in 13. So I was trying to keep it as authentic as I could, you know, some of the same guys to work on it, to hang the body, and so that's turned out pretty well.
And even right down to the tires. We talked about the tires earlier. When we got the car all done, Greg put it on social media, and Goodyear saw the tires and said, hey, wait a minute, those aren't the period correct tires. And so Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company called us up and said, how about we make you 4 brand new tires? We're gonna have to go back in our archives and get the right number, right molding and all that. So they just hand built these tires for us for this particular car. Goodyear did, and we just got them a week ago. So they're brand new, period correct tires.
Yeah, because you can see the current tires don't have number 1 on there anymore. I don't know, would they stop doing that in the early 2000s, having the number 1 on there?
What do you think it was?
I don't know.
See, he's my historian.
I really don't know. That's one thing I don't know.
You just weren't like getting flamed on Twitter for having the wrong tires?
I promise you, they're a bunch of smart alecks on Twitter that know exactly the answer you're looking for.
They'll be in the comments too.
Yes, they will.
Don't worry.
They will, for sure.
Wow.
So we plan on doing some cool things with it. I don't know exactly. I do know that the Southern 500, pacing the field, I do know we're going to take it to Vegas.
You're getting a fresh surface on Rockingham now.
Yeah, I heard about that. I heard to in fact, I was on the phone last weekend. I called down there. I said, is this true? You're really repaving this whole track? He said, yeah, the whole track. So that's pretty cool.
So is this like the Rockingham type configuration on this car now with the body and the rear end and all that?
It really, well, it's got, I don't know if the rear end has got as much camber. I think it does. Yeah, I believe this is actually identical. So it wouldn't take much work to take it to Rockingham. That's for sure.
That'd be really cool. Let's talk to Jamie.
Oh yeah, underside is spotless. Did they not run the H pipe in the exhaust back then? It looks like it's just got one pipe for each header.
You know, we had different exhaust back then. Road course exhaust, we had oval track exhaust, so I can't actually tell you the right answer on that one.
This was the exhaust that was in the car when it got delivered to us from Penske back in the end of '97, beginning of '98. So
okay, that's interesting. I always pay attention to that stuff. I'm a big exhaust nerd.
We didn't change it. That's exactly how it came to us from Penske.
Is this a Penske built chassis, or was this when you were still getting them from a builder?
This was a Ronnie Hopkins chassis.
Hopkins?
This was a Hopkins car, yeah. You know, back then, Ronnie Hopkins really worked with us. When we were building Team Penske, I remember from the start, he would come by our shop all the time, and he had a lot of ideas, and we would go with the ideas. Buddy Parrott was really involved in all that, and so was Todd Parrott, and then a lot of the different crew chiefs we had, you know, right down to Robin Pemberton. Everybody knew about this car and knew about what Ronnie could do. And then when Team Penske said, hey, it's enough of buying cars from everybody, you know, whether it was Mike Laughlin back in the day or Ronnie Hopkins, we started jigging up and building everything ourselves. And so, but this was the original Hopkins car.
Huh.
With the Team Penske spin on it. So maybe that's the reason it was so fast. I don't know.
When you get a chassis from a builder like that and then it would come in to get done, were there, like, do you remember any of the things that would get changed on there? Because I'm sure you'd order a car one way and then tweak it a little bit so Hopkins didn't know what you were doing.
Well, upper control arm mounts, we would do that. Upper control arm lengths, we would cut the upper control arm plates off and change a little bit of that around, change some of the anti-dive in the front of the car. We would go to the back. Sometimes we would stagger our truck arms a little bit, and we'd have to cut the mounts off and redo that a bit. Then the normal stuff, you know, get everything in the driver's compartment set for me, you know, and the other normal stuff, the oil tank, all the way it vents in the back, we do it the way we wanted to do it. And little stuff like that, because you're right, you know, you would start off with a Hopkins chassis, and it came basically frame rails with floor pan and the whole roll cage, and then you'd have to upfit it yourself, everything else. Unlike today, where NASCAR basically sells every part, and every car's got to be exactly the same. That's not how it was back then. We all had our own little twist we could do to it.
What were some of the things in your driver's area that were specific to you or that you were picky about?
The seat, the arm on the right side right here, most every single seat, the height of this part and the height of the right side this was always a little taller all the time. But for me, I made it as tall as I possibly could. In fact, I would sit in the car with my arm up like this because I wanted to arm that rest as high as I possibly could so it would support my neck more. Because, I mean, you go to a place like Dover, Delaware, super high G's there, and you go to Bristol, which was the most G forces, it would really, there was a couple times I almost didn't make the race because I was just so tired because my neck just gave out. So much so that I went and bought myself a neck machine where I would sit down and hold it and put all this weight on it and stiffen my neck up all the time. But I needed that extra insurance that I was going to be able to perform at Bristol specifically as best I could. And so I brought that up so high that it was almost uncomfortable, but in a car, it didn't feel that way. And I won 9 races with that thought process at Bristol, so it worked okay for me.
Did the neck machine help at all?
It's got to help because I used it every single time. I used it a lot, so I'm not going to say it didn't help. Every time I went, man, I was always on that neck machine trying to strengthen up my neck muscles.
Huh.
What about your headrest? That was kind of unique compared to some other guys, the left side headrest, right?
Yeah, it really, if you look at it, it doesn't do anything compared to what we know nowadays, but it's really flimsy. But it was just made to keep your head from flying out the window if you get hit in the door or something, you know, so.
There's no right side headrest, only left side headrest, which is pretty unique compared to some of those guys from back then, I believe.
It wasn't usually the other way?
Usually the other way around.
Exactly.
They would lay their head against it. Well, I tried doing that. I tried putting a headrest on the right side, and it was just a nuisance to me. I couldn't stand it. I moved around the car a lot. And that thing, just to say dead still and drive like that, I couldn't do it. So I threw that thing out and put this on just for safety and jacked the right side of that seat up, and away I went. And it worked out.
Did you have any little pockets or anything where you like kept something in the car, or water bottle,
Just
stuff
right here.
like that?
Like we'd tape the Sharpie to the top of the wheel right there, so I'd be on our caution flag before the race started, and you're running around on the pace laps, and you're trying to get your pit road speed just right. So I'd take the Sharpie, I'd pop it out, I'd stick my hand in there, and I would scribble 3,900 or 4,100 or whatever it was in the second gear to run the pit road speed, and I'd stick it back in this little hole right here, and off I went. And so when I come down pit road, I'd look at the front of the tack, and I always had a piece of tape on there, which we didn't put the tape on now, but there was usually a piece of white tape, so it would contrast the black marker, and I always wrote my pit road speed on there. I wasn't a smoker like my mentor Dick Trickle, who won everything in the world. He'd have a cigarette lighter, and he'd have an area over there to hold the cigarettes and stuff while I was driving, you know, because he would always light up on a caution flag all the time, but I never did do that.
Did you configure your gauges so that they all pointed a certain way when they were up to temperature, or were they like, when you read them, they were all level?
Yeah, you know, I never did do that. I know exactly what you're saying. So you want, when you get the pressures and the temperatures where they should be, you twist the gauges where they're all straight up and down. I didn't need to do that. I just look at a gauge and it said 180, it was 180, you know?
Yeah.
But I can understand how a lot of people like doing that, but I didn't. I didn't like looking at the dashboard and see everything all kind of crazy looking, all cockeyed, you know? I wanted it all looking symmetrical and looking right.
All the OCD says like water, oil, and it's just
yeah,
like,
I couldn't do that.
yeah, that would bother me too. This is the cool stuff here, like just the little details about what made this space your own compared to somebody else's.
Well, you sit and look at the leg supports. That always fit real good. Like I keep mentioning Bristol to you because Bristol was the most G-forces that we run everywhere. And as you come down the front straight, we had Bristol, especially on an old Bristol where it had the way the banking was, it would just slam you in the corner. It's a little easier going at the corner now with the compound banking like they have now, but back then when it was one banking angle, man, I'm telling you what, you'd bomb down that turn one and you'd land and be bam, it just run around your whole body, trying to throw your whole body out the window. But these side supports from my legs really supported all that, and I could really throttle up and modulate the throttle real good that way and do what I call part throttling. You know, I used to do that a lot at Bristol, probably more than most tracks. I was always doing what they call a part throttle. As soon as the car would land, I'd go back like 20% throttle, then 30%, 40%. A lot of guys that run in there, brake real hard, you know, slide up the track and then wide back open on the throttle. As soon as that thing was set, I would just give it all the throttle I could. And I had some incredible center corner speed doing that. And grabbed a lot of pole positions doing that, so it all worked out.
Did Trickle do that too?
Trickle went down to Bristol one time, and he stood down the corner and watched me. He says, man, I don't know what you're doing, but that exhaust sounds really weird, man. I've listened to all of these cars. I don't hear any of these cars sounding like this, but your car almost sounds like you never come out of the throttle. I said, well, I come out of the throttle, but I immediately go back in just 5-10%, you know. So I know it had a weird sound right there.
Because it wasn't on decel, you were still in it.
Yeah, I mean, I was completely out of the throttle, but in it so much faster. When most people are waiting to get in the throttle, like maybe a mid-corner, I just learned this little trick how I could get in and be on the brake and off the brake and just go part throttle from the entry to the center a lot right there. And that helped me, but some tracks you couldn't do that at. But that was one of them that really worked real good for me at.
I think that you were more protected than a lot of other people, because I see, like, it looks like pool noodle foam just zip tied to the cage.
Back in the day, I mean, we started paying attention to safety a lot more as the years went on. I mean, before, man, I used to run fiberglass seats in these things with no support at all, and just 1/4-inch bolts holding the seat in. Nobody ever got hurt. You didn't even think about it. I'll never forget when I left St. Louis, I won the '83 American Speed Association Championship with an old fiberglass seat. And I took my seat and I brought it down and gave it to the guys at Cliff Stewart Racing. That's the first Cup team I drove for. And they said, what is this thing, you know? And I looked at their seat and I said, what is that thing? They were sitting on a pickup truck seat with springs in it, you know?
Wow.
And I'm sitting in a seat that's made out of fiberglass. Oh my God, later, as we went on, the Brian Butler was building most of the seats then. That's what this is. And then now they got all the carbon fiber seats. And safety is so much better now than it was. But you know, we thought that was the safest we were going to get. Everything you're seeing right here, that's what we thought. In fact, this is exactly how the inside was when I went end over 20 times at Talladega, Alabama in 1993, one of the worst wrecks I ever had. I still got a big pin on my wrist right now from that wreck. End over end, and the first guy to the shop the very next day besides my team was Bill Simpson. He was there just to make sure everything was super safe in that car, and it withstood what it withstood. All the belts were perfect, everything in the car was perfect, and it ripped the body off, ripped the motor out and everything, and I'm in that cocoon, and it all worked out. But he was one of the guys they're always looking.
That's awesome. It
Yeah,
speaks
but
a lot to his character to come check on you like that and make sure you're safe.
I miss him. He was a great friend of mine, and I wore all his suits, his helmets, his belt, everything. Everything was always, for me, was always perfect.
If you want to talk about Bill Simpson's safety, I found something that you haven't even seen yet.
Oh, really?
I came across the authentic helmet from this period.
I knew you. If anybody's going to find one of the most authentic helmets, that's it.
Greg
So-
with the surprises.
Look at that. So he knew we were going to do this taping today, but he didn't tell me this. But, okay, so this would have been the helmet I wore during this period of time. It's a Simpson helmet. And with all the radios in it, size 7 1/4, which I always wore. With the my dark shield that I always liked, you know. And boy, I tell you, that shield in the sunlight looks real good still. Good job, buddy. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's amazing. So when I drive this car,
I wouldn't suggest wearing this.
why not?
If you want to wear a 30-year-old helmet, you can, but
Well, I wore a helmet like that.
It's not my head.
I wore that same helmet, went 25 times
Okay,
into a rent at
okay.
Talladega. I'm still standing here.
Point taken.
What do you guys think?
I'm just thinking this is a car you could park in your living room and just look at it forever.
It's artwork, isn't
It is. It really is.
A lot of people restore stuff and make it nice, but I've never seen one this nice yet. Mr. Penske hasn't seen this car yet,
Really.
and I've got a feeling if he saw it, he'd go, that's the way I would do it. He does everything pretty well perfect, and this car right here I think would make everybody at Team Penske proud.
After it left the Hall of Fame, it went up to our Ford dealership. We have going on 9 car dealerships now, and it went up to the Ford store in Knoxville, Tennessee. It sat there for a while, and actually they decided to take on the Bronco line, so they needed space in the showroom. So the car came back here, and this has been my #1 pet project that I've wanted to do with any of our old race cars for a long time. Because this is, I mean, when you think of, part of my job is to maintain the history of our brand, and our brand is built on him and performance. And this is think of Rusty Wallace. This is what you think of. So it's really important to me to get this car up and running. So when that car came back from the Ford store, I was like, this is my shot. So we talked to Dad about it. We got it going. It was just really important to me to keep it authentic. And you see some of these restorations that are really hacked together,
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. So everything from the engine to the interior to everything that I can control, we just try to keep it as authentic as we could. So.
It might be a stupid question, but what was the reasoning behind the blue lug nuts? Because they're always yellow, like in other teams, other race cars.
Good question.
You see old pictures and they're blue too, so.
That's a good question.
I don't know.
I don't know. Like I said, this car was delivered to us from Penske in 1990, beginning of '98, as a Taurus, and actually sat in our showroom at RWI and in storage for a while. And that was actually what was on the car when it came to us. So I haven't changed the lug nuts. The lug nuts are actually the authentic ones that came with us, came with the car in '98. So that might be a question for Penske. I don't know.
I think it would look better with yellow lug nuts,
Yeah,
don't you?
match the
Yeah.
car.
But yeah, that's having different car lug nuts. That's not a very Roger Penske thing to do at all.
Well, all the old pictures, they're blue too.
Well, you know,
I don't know.
it could be as simple as in 1998, the Penske cars were blue.
True.
Maybe they did match the lug nuts up to the car.
They even got
Maybe
the matching pinstripes on the wheels. Like usually they got a red one or a yellow one, and this one has both.
That's very cool, isn't it?
Yeah, the small details like that.
The stripes on the wheels. Pick up all the colors in the decals. I'm telling you, man, not because I drove it, but this was one sexy car. It's just such a beautiful car. Everybody loved Midnight, and I still love this black and yellow scheme. And for somebody that says something negative about that, I'm telling you, they're flat wrong, because the majority of the world loves this hot rod right here, I'll tell you.
Have you sat in it and fired up since it's run, or has it been Greg every time?
You know what? It's been Greg every single time. Maybe I should do that. You want me to get in there?
I think you should.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you should.
Okay.
To keep the period correct, this is the Kodak moment right here.
There you go.
That's exactly how I used to get in it too.
See if he still fits. You fit in there okay?
How about that?
Need a porta power or anything? All right.
It's perfect. I'm a little fatter. Gained a couple pounds, but looks like I need to adjust the mirror just a little bit. But the wheels just perfect. Brake pedals, everything is right like it used to be. Pretty good, huh? I like it.
It's kind of funny, there's a Tesla in the background right now.
Yeah. Got a hot rod race car with a Tesla behind it, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't even think they had Teslas when I was driving this car, did they?
No,
I don't think so.
No, Tesla still meant the inventor back then.
Boy, it sounds incredible in here too. All right, well, you ready to back it back in?
Yeah, you can do it.
Close the hood.
Oh yeah. You couldn't just back it in, no way.
I think it's got some power, man. It gets it. I miss it, I do. That was a lot of fun.
I don't even have anything to say. That was just like one of those goosebump moments.
That was awesome. You were smiling the whole time too.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
cool.
That's good. Remember that used to be in Victory Lane, and you'd I could maybe win the race, and I'd pull my helmet off and I'd hang it up, and I'm still on the racetrack and I'm driving around and everything's super loud in the car and it's jumping back and forth because of the gear ratios. That's what it just did. That's what memory just came back to me when I fired it up. Did that mini burnout right there. It's like, God, I remember this. I remember this a lot, man. I miss it.
So would you say the odds of seeing this thing back on a track making some noise is possible?
Oh yeah. I don't know where we're gonna take it and actually maybe throw down a hard lap with it, but we'll definitely have it at Darlington, and we'll definitely have it out in Las Vegas. Pacing the field, and I don't know, maybe when I pace the field and it's time for me to pull off, I can throttle up then and knock a lap down at Darlington in it or something, you know? What about a couple years ago when Richard Petty did that? He couldn't get him off the track. Remember that?
Yeah, they had to black flag him.
That'd be black flag me. Get off the track.
If you watch this whole thing, we appreciate you, and you're not alone. You're our kind of people, because much like you, I grew up just loving this stuff. And if you guys didn't love it, we wouldn't be able to do this at all, because if nobody watched these videos, we wouldn't be able to afford to keep making more of them, because it takes a lot of time and energy to do the planning and the filming and deal with the dog squeaking a toy while you're trying to film stuff and all kinds of other noise going on here. I was trying to finish my thought here, but now Logan's making a bunch of noise back there on her car, so let's go see what she's doing. Making all kinds of racket. I'm trying to have a profound thought here, and you're just back there tearing it up.
Yeah.
Nobody has seen this car on this channel before.
Nope.
For people who think that you just stand there and ask questions with me, don't know that you actually do stuff.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Taking the rest of the floor out of my car.
What is this car?
My 67 Mustang. You like my shirt?
Yeah, I like your shirt. That hoodie.
Yeah.
That new hoodie. Hair clip not included.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Withstands work abuse.
Yeah. I've hit it a lot on this sharp edge when I was climbing under. I'll stop doing this right now and we'll go look at some of the merch that doesn't look like this.
That's not work used.
Yeah.
You can support the channel and find all this stuff at staplestonautoworks.com.
Look at this stuff.
Would you just look at it? Here's the shirt version too.
Yeah, the hoodies are brand new. We just got them.
Yeah, the shirt design, we sold out of those like back in, I don't know, pretty much right after we released them, and we just got more, but we also had them made in hoodies because now it's cold now. We got the matching hat. It's a snapback. It's got like the Winston looking eagle on it, but its wings are boom tubes and he's holding a wrench. Really comfortable. This is the one you see me wearing a lot. Then we got decals too, with all the logos on there.
Got these.
Yeah, they're not Winston themed, but we just added them to the website.
The retro one. And then pink, because I had to have pink ones for me.
Yeah, we never really have anything female oriented before, so now we do.
Yeah.
You know, Christmas coming up, you could stick that in your wife, mother, or girlfriend's stocking, and I'm sure that they would just love it.
Yeah. I mean, I like it.
With this design here, we didn't want to offend any brand loyalists, so this car is kind of like a generic-ish version of like the 1988 Buick, because who the heck gets mad about a Buick?
Every order that is placed is packed and shipped by me when I have the time to do it, which I'm not Amazon, so I don't pack it instantly, but I try my best.
Yeah, sometimes you do.
Yeah.
If we're in town, it's no more than a couple days before stuff gets out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If we're out of town, I'm sorry, but I do my best.
Yeah.
And I write a handwritten note, and both of us sign it.
Yep. Every single one, because we care. And if you're still watching this, we know that you're the real deal, because most people who don't really care, they're just here for Rusty. They don't care about us. They're already gone. So, you know, we know times are tight, so we made the decal pack cheap relative for getting 5 stickers. Most people sell like $5 for a sticker. Well, you get 5 stickers for $9 here. You can put them on your toolbox, your phone, give them to your friends, whatever. You still get the handwritten note, even if you get a sticker pack.